there, it's Tanya from Azteco. Now, there is a time and place for strategic thought leadership. However, in this video series, we would like to focus on action leadership, the people who are driving Bitcoin consumer adoption by making it easier and simpler to use. And so I am delighted to welcome here today Hernan, the chairman of Bitcoin Ekasi. Hernan, thank you so much for joining us.
How's it? Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. So please go ahead, share with the people, who you are, what is your background, tell us more about you.
My name is Hermann. I'm the chairman of Bitcoin Ekasi. My background is, I've always been sort of self-employed. I've spent the last decade plus building a business that my wife and I co-own, a tourism business, and on the side we were building the surf kids. So I've never really had a proper job.
And go ahead and tell us very briefly, what is Bitcoin Ekasi?
Bitcoin Ekasi is basically just a project that aims to pay the salaries of a team of about 13 people in Bitcoin. So we transitioned fiat salaries over to Bitcoin and onboarded shops to accept payment in Bitcoin at the same time.
Can you please share with the people what is the story behind the Surfer Kids and how this evolved into Bitcoin Ekasi?
Yeah, sure thing. The certificates was started in 2010, established in 2010. My wife and I started that alongside the tourism business that we co-own and operate until today. And basically, the aim with the Surfer Kids was twofold. We wanted to give tourists who we bring into the country a unique experience, because it's really easy to travel to South Africa and not experience the majority of the country. It's very easy to feel like you're visiting a warmer version of Europe. You really have to go out of your way to experience the other side of the country. And so the Surfer Kids was this idea that if we can create sort of a level playing field where tourists can meet some of the local population in a constructive environment, and at the same time give a bunch of kids something constructive to do.
That's really great. And what efforts have you put into Bitcoin education in Africa? So I noticed that you translated some of your website into Zulu and so on.
We produced a series of videos. I think that's what you're referring to. That was with the help of Bitrefill and Exonumia, which is Exonumia is a translation project. They translate Bitcoin text into African languages, and so with their help and with the backing of Bitrefill, we produced I think it was three different videos in Zulu, Xhosa, and Sesotho. Those are three of the biggest African languages spoken in South Africa. They are 10-minute video clips that explain Bitcoin, and it's proven very useful in a country where illiteracy is very high. It's often easier to explain things verbally rather than to give written material. People can understand their mother tongue, but they can't always read it very well. So, other than that, we've built a education center focused on Bitcoin education. We're in the process of actually expanding that into a bigger facility, and the primary aim of that is Bitcoin education. We use the Bitcoin diploma from Mi Primer Bitcoin in El Salvador that was translated to English, and we add some material where necessary.
That's really pretty. And how can people join Bitcoin Ekasi, especially for the locals?
Well, for the Bitcoin diploma program, we are recruiting individuals from the community. We have an open center, and anyone is welcome to walk in at any time. Well, not any time, within working hours, within office hours, and there will always be someone there. We have three educators that work from that center, and yeah, people can come in, ask questions. It's happening more and more now with the price that's been going up considerably over the last several months. So as we've seen the price go up, we've seen more interest. People just walking in from the community asking questions: how to buy Bitcoin, how to buy Bitcoin with vouchers, how to spend it at the shops, which wallets to use, etc., etc. And we try and recruit as many people as possible for the Bitcoin diploma. And yeah,
What is your favorite Bitcoin consumer adoption story?
um, I mean, it's a developing story. It's an evolving story, so it hasn't reached its conclusion yet. But my favorite story so far is the story of our project lead in the community, Lutando. Um, he was there when we started the Ekasi project in August 2021. He was the first coach to receive his salary payment in Bitcoin. He was the person who onboarded most of the shops in the township community. Um, and he's been saving in Bitcoin throughout this entire bear market. So when we started the project, that was towards the tail end of the previous bull market, late 2021. When he onboarded the first shops, um, they saw the previous all time high in November 2021, which was more or less where we are now. And then obviously the price corrected all the way down to whatever it was at the bottom of the bear market. And throughout that entire time, Lutando received his salary in Sats. He's been saving Bitcoin throughout that entire time. Um, and I mean, look, we're talking about a very poor community here. People live in shacks. There's no running water. It's a pretty tough situation to be in. And to see somebody saving and stacking sats throughout an entire bear market coming from that background, knowing where the price of Bitcoin is going, and understanding what sort of a change that's going to affect in that person's life. I'm very excited to see what happens. Lutando is going to be a very wealthy man one day, perhaps sooner than a lot of us expect. And that will be incredible to see, because it's the result of hard work and the result of making the right decision, which is to save in Bitcoin.
And I just want to go ahead and expand on that. How do you think that Bitcoin is helping the unbanked in general in Africa?
Well, that's exactly that. I think people, it's funny. I was replying to a message this morning, and it was somebody who had written an article about the Ekasi project in a local magazine, and I get some questions. When I some questions, when I get them, I can immediately see that this is a question coming from someone that's looking at Bitcoin from the outside. It's not someone that's in Bitcoin and asking questions. It's someone that's completely removed from it. And one of the most typical questions that I get is, oh, but what about the volatility? This is such a volatile asset. And I always find it funny that people who, and these are typically this question typically comes from people who are obviously more privileged. They've got probably a relatively high income, and volatility always seems to be the thing that they worry about the most. And as I was answering this person's question, and I mean it's completely understandable. I understand why they asked this, but as I was answering this person's question, it occurred to me that it's interesting that people ask about volatility, but don't think to ask the flip side, which is, but what about the volatility of the local fiat currency? Because yeah, but Bitcoin is volatile over the short term, but if you zoom out, it's volatile in an upwards direction. Whereas if you zoom out on a fiat currency, it's pretty volatile in a downwards direction. I mean, the South African rand has lost, I don't know, 80-90% of its value over the course of my lifespan against the dollar. And the dollar itself is depreciating in value. So that tells you something about the local fiat currency. It's highly volatile over the long term in a downward direction, and Bitcoin's volatile in upward direction, and it's only if you cherry pick isolated timelines that the volatility seems like a problem, but it rarely occurs to people that if you don't have a permanent address because you live in a shack and you haven't got a house, you can't open any kind of account with any sort of traditional financial institution. What are you going to do? The only financial asset that you have access to is a melting ice cube. Um, and so it's actually kind of miraculous that there is something like Bitcoin where there's permissionless access to something that is a legitimate store of value. Um, so I kind of want to almost tell people who ask that question, it's like you should be thinking about it from completely the opposite direction. You shouldn't be asking me about the volatility of Bitcoin being a problem. You should be asking me about the volatility of the local fiat currency being a problem for people who don't have access to anything else.
That was a very well comprised answer, so thank you so much. I'm sure everyone's going to appreciate it. And just to further expand into more personal level on how this actually evolves, which is how do you believe Bitcoin is bringing dignity back to the people in Africa?
I mean, it kind of, we'll have to see much wider adoption for it to really bring back that level of dignity, because it's very isolated for now. There is the story of Lutando that I just went over, and it's brought an incredible amount of dignity to his life, but it's a pretty isolated case because adoption is not yet widespread. There are pockets of adoption, and the idea is to see adoption spread from those pockets out to a wider scope. And if that happens, then yeah, absolutely. I think it could bring dignity back into people's lives. I mean, I want to, just speaking from my own personal experience, I want to attend two conferences in Europe later this year, and it's a completely disbalanced relationship, where people from the first world, developed world, can buy a plane ticket, get on a plane, and fly to South Africa, and that's it. But for me, I have to go through this horrible process of applying for a visa, but I've got to buy the plane ticket before I apply for the visa, because I cannot apply for a visa without a plane ticket. But if I buy the plane ticket, I cannot buy a refundable ticket. It's got to be a ticket that is final. But I don't know if I'm going to get the visa. If the visa is not approved, I lose the money on the plane ticket. It's this like chicken and egg problem, and it just I'm not saying Bitcoin is going to do anything about the visa situation, but I'm trying to describe how unbalanced the situation is between certain parts of the world. There are parts of the world that have a lot of power, um, and influence, and then there are other parts of the world that have almost no power, no influence. And just as the visa situation, the travel situation is imbalanced, so the flow of money is also imbalanced. It's very easy for a person from the first world to bring wealth into a country like South Africa, but it's very, very difficult for me to take my wealth and use it elsewhere. We have very strict capital controls. Um, my currency is depreciating a lot faster than other currencies, so that creates an imbalance of power. And something like Bitcoin can definitely restore a sense of dignity by giving people the ability to do something which is only natural, really. I mean, there shouldn't be this imbalance of power between different individuals that live in different parts of the world. Um, and because Bitcoin is permissionless, it doesn't care about borders. It doesn't care about capital controls. It doesn't care about which country has more power and more influence. It doesn't care about any of that. And an exchange of value between two people on opposite sides of the planet is a completely balanced situation if that value exchange is flowing through Bitcoin.
Do you have any last comments that you would like to share with us today?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to be a very interesting year. I'm very excited for what's coming. Um, but I don't think we should get too excited about the price and about the ETFs and about all these big things happening. I think really people need to stick to, well, no, everyone's free to do whatever the hell they want, but we just need to be aware of where Bitcoin came from, why was it created, and think about the way forward with that in mind, and not get sidetracked by all these other things happening on the side. I mean, as fantastic as the ETF is, the people buying the ETF don't own Bitcoin. They own a financial instrument that's built on top of that, which is fine. It's just that we have to remember where this came from and why it was created, and it's great that to see the value go up, but we have to remember it's a grassroots thing. It's got to be, not everybody has to be focused on building things from a grassroots level up, but I think everybody should do well to remember that that's kind of where it came from. It wasn't created for large institutions to become wealthier than what they already are. It was created for ordinary people, um, as a replacement for a system that is completely corrupt. And we should just keep that in mind. There's no point us trying to play to the people who created this problem in the first place. We should not be trying to appease or please the people who created the problems to begin with. All these large institutions like BlackRock and so on, a lot of them were behind a lot of the shit that happened in 2008. And we just need to remember that.
Thank you so much for your time, Herman. We really appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you.